Hello and welcome everyone. I am Tejas and welcome back to another video. In this one, we are going to check out how to containerize a web app that is built using Django and React JS using Docker. We are also going to have a PostgreSQL database running inside its own container. Further, we are going to serve the entire application using two Nginx web servers, one for the React.js app and another one for Django. Now, this tutorial assumes that you know how Django works, how React.js works, and you also have a certain amount of knowledge about Nginx web servers and reverse proxying. I'm going to be talking about them in this tutorial in short, but if you want to read in depth about these technologies, then you're free to Google about them and gather more information. Apart from this, you should also know how Docker works under the hood and what are the various terminologies that are related to Docker. If you don't already know that, I have written a blog on that as well. You can go check that out. I'll be leaving the links in the description down below. Docker is a blessing for developers because it really helps you to get over the questions or the arguments which involve sentences like it is working on my machine, I don't know why it is not working on your machine. So Docker really helps you get over that. So without wasting much time, let's get started. Now, discussing the architecture of the app, we're going to have various containers here. So we're going to have a Python container inside which we'll be installing Django and then running it using Gunicon. And then Gunicon, or some people call it Gunicorn. Next, we're going to have an Nginx server container through which we'll be reverse proxying to the Django app container, and we'll be routing the traffic through the Nginx server. Similarly, we are going to have a front-end application that is a Node.js container inside which we'll be running the React.js app, and then we are going to route the traffic through another Nginx front-end server container. The next is the PostgreSQL container that we're going to run directly from the Docker Hub, and all these containers that are running are going to expose their ports to the host machine and then communicate or talk with each other via this interface. So the process itself is, I would say, a bit lengthy, but it's simple. I'm going to be running through the commands one by one, explaining what they do exactly. So first thing, I'm going to be changing my directory to desktop. Right, so I'm here, and I'll be following this blog. You can just go on my blog and read about it if you prefer textual material to video. So here I'm going to create a new directory and call it Docker tutorial, and it's empty directory. I didn't cd. I'm going to cd into Docker tutorial, then check it's an empty directory. Now next is I'm going to create a virtual environment in here, so just do that. If you don't already know, virtual environment is like creating a Python installation isolation wherein you can install specific libraries or specific modules related to that particular project. Now once you have that, the next step is to activate that environment, activate that virtual environment. So I'm just gonna activate that, and then we are going to install certain Python packages, namely Django for running the Django app. Gunicon is a mod Python WSGI, which we'll be using to reverse proxy from Nginx. Then Psycorp G2 binary. This is a PostgreSQL interface of Python, and then G event to spin up multiple workers of the Gunicorn mod WSGI. So here I'm just going to install Django. Then we have Psycorp G2 binary, and next we're going to have G event. So it will take a few seconds to get all the packages, all the libraries. Once it's done, we can create a simple Django project and call it uh, Backend. You can name your project anything you want. So if I just check the contents of this directory, I'm going to have a virtual environment folder, a backend folder. So this is my Django project. Next, I'm going to create a React app and just call it Frontend. So the command is npx create React app frontend, and this is assuming that you have Node installed on your computer, Node and npm installed on your computer. If you don't know that, you can go to official websites of these technologies and check out the installation process. So this will take some time. I'm going to skip through the part where it creates the front-end application and loads all the libraries. Now you can see that the React app is being created. We can just ls in the folder to see the folders present inside here. We have a backend folder, we have a front-end folder, and we have the virtual environment. So the next step is going into the backend folder or a Django app, and then simply creating a requirements.txt file, since we will be needing this while installing requirements inside the container. So once I have this, I'll just ls and check the requirements file. I can do requirements.txt to confirm that I have these requirements listed inside the file. Now the next step is creating a Docker file here. So I'll just create a Docker file inside the backend folder, and in here we'll be pasting some commands which will tell the system to install Django and all the requirements inside the Python container, and then spin up the Gunicon server. So for this, the first command, the first line, that is from Python 3.8. So this tells Docker to get the Python 3.8 image from the Docker hub and then run it locally. Env python this. So this basically tells us not to tells the Docker container not to generate any PyCache files, or not to uh, just that. So after this, the next step is copy the content of the app inside the container. So this basically tells Docker that copy everything that is present in the backend folder inside the container inside a folder app. So basically this will copy our entire app into the containers app folder. Next we'll be setting the work directory to app, so we don't have to always specify the path, or we don't have to specify slash app everywhere while we are running certain commands. Now once you have this set up, the next process is simple. In the conventional way, like we do Python manage.py make migrations, Python manage.py migrate, and then run the server, we'll be following the same thing here. So we'll be installing the requirements, and like I said, so if we didn't give this, that is the work directory slash app, here we'd have to do slash app slash requirements, but since we already have the work directory set to app, we don't have to do this. The next command is running the migrations, so I'll just be taking that. After that we'll need to migrate, and then finally we need to spin up the Gunicon server. So with this, a Docker file for the backend service is complete, and we can exit this out of here. And now if I ls, we'll be having a new file, that is Docker file inside of this backend folder. Now the next step is creating the Docker file for the front-end folder. So I just go to the front-end directory, and here you can see this is the normal normal React app that comes with all the boilerplate. So here, firstly, I'll be creating a new file and call it sudo vim. It's called Dockerignore, and here I'll be um, pasting in, pasting or copying these folders, which are build. So I'll be copying in these two folders here, and we copied our entire app to the app directory inside the container. We are going to do the same thing here, just we are not going to copy the node modules folder and the build folder if we have it. So the process is pretty simple. We'll simply create a new Docker file in here, and I'll just I want to be doing it line by line. I'll just copy everything all at once. So just do this. There's something missing. Just append that. Yeah. So now going command by command, this tells Docker to get the node alpine image and set the alias as builder. This will set the work directory to this path. Then copy our entire app inside the container. Run npm install to install all the node packages that we have in our package.json. Then we'll be setting the environment path to bin path. So basically making all the scripts or all the modules that we have inside the node modules, they'll be added to the environment. Then we'll run the build command, which will build our node app, and then this is some nginx specific configuration which we need to run or serve our React app from through the nginx web server. Few things here you can see. We have the nginx config that we'll be creating in the next step. So we just copy that nginx config inside the container inside nginx.template, and then we simply just copy everything into the build folder and then run it through nginx. Once this is done, I'll save this, just ls, and we have a Docker file here. But we also mentioned a file by the name of nginx config, so we'll create that. And in here I'm just going to copy everything from here. Now to explain about this, so this tells the nginx or the node or the React JS container to listen on port, tells the nginx server inside the React JS container to listen on port 80, and to serve the index.html inside the build folder as the default index. So this is what it does, and just save it. And if I do ls, we have a Docker file, nginx config, and where's Dockerignore? I guess I didn't save the Dockerignore, so let me create that again. Sudo vim Dockerignore. It's there. It's strange. I can't. Okay, yeah. So it's .dockerignore, and that's the reason I'm not able to see. Cool. Dot, generally the files that have a suffix, that have a prefix of a dot, are generally hidden in Linux systems. Now that we're done with the front end configuration of the container and the web server, the next thing is to configure a reverse proxy using another nginx container to our Django app. So we'll be going back, and here we'll create a new folder and call it nginx backend server, and ls this is, and then just cd into that server. You can see it's empty, and here we'll create a Docker file which will tell the nginx container to remove the default configuration that comes in with nginx, and then copy our custom nginx configuration, which we'll write in the next step inside the container. So I'll just select all of these, copy, and just paste. So this will get the image from the Docker hub. Then it will remove the default configuration that nginx comes in with, and it will copy our custom nginx.conf, which we'll create in the next step inside the conf.d inside the container. So let's save this, do a quick ls. We have the Docker file, and now we need to create the nginx.conf file that we have. call it nginx.conf, and I'll be copying the entire thing. Just take this, copy. Now here you can see this listens to port 8000 and it is reverse proxying to HTTP backend 8000. So basically, if we go to the backend Docker file, we see that we run a command that is gunicorn on port 8000, and we have certain configuration, that is worker connections 1000 and worker equals 5 backend.wstr. So basically we run gunicorn on port 8000 to serve a Django app, and then nginx acts as a reverse proxy, and all the connections coming in on 8000 are forwarded to the backend 8000. I'll be explaining why did we name this as backend further. So just think of this as we have a backend service running, and inside the backend service we have, so this is basically the backend container, and inside the container on port 8000 we have the Django application running, which we are reverse proxying to. So once this is done, with this we complete the configuration, that is the application's configuration. Now the next step is to start everything at once, like start the nginx containers, start the React app, start the Django app, start the PostgreSQL, and just spin up the entire application. So for that we'll be coming a directory back to the root directory, that is Docker tutorial, and here we are going to create a file and call it docker compose.yml. So like you already noticed, we created a Docker file inside each module of our project. So we have a Docker file inside the backend folder, we have a Docker file inside the front end folder, we have a Docker file inside the reverse proxy nginx server. Now what Docker Compose exactly does is, we like it is like a super control, we can say it acts like a super control for all these three Docker files that we created, and it will tell Docker to start certain services after certain services are started, and on which port to run which service, and like we have like the host ports and the virtual machine ports, so on which ports to run which service, it will basically tell that. So I'll just be copying I'll just copy everything from the docker-compose.yml file and then just paste it here. Take that, and here I'll go line by line. So this is version 3, so basically the .yml syntax is of version 3. Then the services herein will tell Docker which services to run. So I'm naming my first service as database. The image is going to be post. So you did notice that we didn't create a folder for Postgres. We didn't create a folder for PostgreSQL configuration. We'll be doing that here. Instead of creating a separate folder and creating a Docker file inside it for the database, we'll be doing it here directly. So we have the image, that is PostgreSQL. Then we have the volumes, that is backup data, and so we're going to map this folder from our host machine to the folder in the container. So whatever data is created in the database is going to get stored as a backup in this folder on the host machine, so that we don't face any loss of data when we are starting or restarting the servers. Now we're going to supply some environment variables, that is the name of the database, user, and password. You can find details about this on the Docker Hub on the URL of this official image. Next service is the backend. So build.backend. So what build exactly does is, it tells to go inside this folder, that is the backend folder we had in our if I just open another terminal, we have the backend folder here, and if we cd into our backend folder and do ls, we have a Docker file here, right? So what this tells Docker is to go inside the backend folder, find that Docker file, and run the commands that are written inside that Docker file. Now again, volumes, we map the original directory with the app directory of the backend. So any changes that we make to our original project get reflected inside the app directory. Putting this in here also gives us the superpower of hot reload, wherein if we make any change to our code while the container is running, it reflects directly inside the container as well. Now depends on database. So this basically tells us wait for the database service to start running completely and then spin up the backend server. Similarly, for frontend, we build the Docker file inside the frontend folder and then we map it to a volume on the host machine. It depends on backend. So basically, when backend starts, only then and then the frontend will start. And then we expose ports, that is the 80 port inside the container of the front end. Remember, we did write the Nginx configuration for the front end that was listed on port 80. So from within the container, we expose that port 80 to our host machine's port 80. Now for the reverse proxy server, that is the Nginx backend server, we build the Docker file inside the Nginx backend server, and the ports that we expose are 8000 and 8000. So if we go to this configuration, we did write this, right? And I told you that I'll be telling what this backend exactly is. So this backend is this. This is the name of the service, and we can simply communicate, like we can make communication happen between the containers using this kind of syntax. So if let's say if for some reason I wanted the database container here, so I'll simply type http colon slash slash and database and whatever port I want to listen on. So I'll be doing that. So build that, so Nginx backend server, build that Docker file and expose port 8000 from the container, because we're listening on 8000, to the host machine 8000, right? And then it depends on backend. So once the backend is up and running, only then and then the Nginx backend server will start, right? So we have everything set up, and one last step that we'll be needing is changing the database of our Django application. So I'll be going into the backend directory and then just go to the backend and edit the settings.py file. So if I come here, if I go to the databases, so I'll be replacing this with a custom configuration. Delete this, copy the entire thing. So like you saw, we have the PostgreSQL for which we installed the Cycop G2. The name is Postgres. So if you go back to the I guess I have it here. So this is a name that we supplied in the environment variables. So if you see name is Postgres, user is going to be Postgres, and password is also going to be Postgres, and host here is database. So this database is basically the name of the service. If I had named it PostgreSQL database, I'd put in the host as PostgreSQL database. So this host in the backend goes to http colon / database. So that's that. And the port is going to be 5432. This is coming in from the official documentation from the Docker Hub, that inside the PostgreSQL container, the server runs on port 532. So once this is configured and everything is done, congratulations, your full stack application is now Dockerized, and let's check it. To run the Docker compose, you need to run a command. It's called docker compose up, and I'll be pressing enter. Now it will run all the commands that are in here. Now I have some pre-built containers, and that's the reason it's taking very less time. But on your machine, it should build everything. It should download the images if they aren't already on your local machine and then start. So it should take some time to start everything, but once it does, it will start showing up everything on the console. And then if I was to go on localhost 8000, I can see that my Django is running here, and it is running through the Nginx backend server. And to check out my React, I can simply go to my localhost 80 and my reactors. So I have both the application served through Nginx running inside their own container. And because Django didn't throw any error as to it could not establish any connection with the database, we can assume that it is connected with the database as well. Now, and thanks for watching. If you have any doubts, comments, or if you want to make this code better, I've put it on my GitHub. I'll be leaving the link in the description down below. So if you have any better approach of doing this, do make pull requests on that repository, and I'll be more than happy to review them. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.